defiled, and that the cottage that snowed and we had remains inside.
Okay. Now, what made you think to tie the crime to the Holocaust?
So it was actually something my mother had said, after the discovery of the crate with the remains inside. You can imagine the whole family was kind of reeling, kind of turned upside down, and we all had very different reactions to it. My husband and I were totally freaked out, and we had 3 young children that we wanted to shield. My brother was a murder suspect, and he was furious that this had happened to us. And my parents were traumatized that the cottage that they had built with their hands, that they had built really as a legacy for their children and their grandchildren, and as a sanctuary for themselves, they felt that it had been defiled. And so we were all kind of wondering, well, now that this has happened, discovery was made, how are we ever going to go back there? And I remember sitting in my mother's kitchen, and she said, well, of course we're going to go back. And my husband seemed a little bit incredulous. Like, he said, you mean, after everything that's going on, you still want to go back there? And my mother and father looked at each other, and my mother said, well, of course we're going back. We've been through nightmares before, and we'll get through this one. And that comment triggered in me the realization that, yes, my parents had been through nightmares, and what we thought was sort of a time where the nightmare was safely behind them now was being dredged up again because of the violence of what we had discovered. So it just occurred to me that I would be able to tell their stories from the past and tie it together with the story of the discovery in the present.
Yeah.
They are very strong. They were very strong, to have survived everything that they did and to come to Canada absolutely penniless, with no language, no money, no jobs, nowhere to live. They just came with my brother in a backpack, and the only words of English that they knew were Coca-Cola. So, I realized that they had this incredible amount of strength and determination to be able to go through all of that and then make a new life for themselves in Toronto. And, they worked very, very hard, and they scrimped and saved and worked like dogs, and eventually were able to afford a very modest little house, but it was in a pretty decent neighborhood. And then eventually, after some more hard work and scrimping and saving, they were able to build our little cottage on the lake. So hardened might not be the right word, because I think they were absolutely horrified at the contents of the crate.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Most of you aren't just listening right now. You're driving, cleaning, and even exercising. But what if you could be saving money by switching to Progressive? Drivers who save by switching save nearly $750 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Multitask right now. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 22 and May 2023. Potential savings. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.
Get smoother, brighter skin instantly in one easy step. Dermalogica's daily microfoliant gives you the smooth, glowy skin you want without damaging your skin barrier. This gentle exfoliating powder activates with water to smooth out rough texture and brighten skin. It's powerful enough to deliver results, yet gentle enough to use every single day, even on sensitive skin. See the results for yourself. Visit Dermalogica.com and use code SMOOTH at cart for an exclusive free gift with $65 purchase.
But, still very, very strong and determined people.
So let's talk about how your parents' Holocaust experience influenced your life, if you don't mind, before we go on further.
kindergarten. I didn't speak English, which was a bit of a challenge. And we dressed different. The foods we ate were very, very different. And again, that shadow that sort of kept our house very quiet and somber, where other kids' houses that I visited, there were loud kids running around, and there were big birthday parties and lots of relatives, and our house was always very quiet and very, very immaculate. I think that's the best word for it. So there was always being different, and then the other thing was that really characterized my childhood was this tremendous amount of guilt, which I think is common for children of Holocaust survivors in general. The feeling of why are we safe and happy and comfortable in Canada or in the United States when our parents went through such hell? How is it that we have all this great stuff when our parents, went through such pain? So there was always that guilt. And then the other side to the guilt is this tremendous pressure that I know I felt and I know my brother felt to sort of live lives that made up for all the relatives who died during the Holocaust. We had to succeed and we had to be happy in place of all the people who died, all the relatives who never got a chance to live and be happy. So that was kind of a big burden to have to bear. But I think, again, it's very common for children of Holocaust survivors to feel that way.
All right, now let's get back to the murder here. Now, have you met the murderer?
Yes, I have. I shook his hand, and he was a frequent guest at our dinner table, and he always struck me as just a big teddy bear. There was nothing about him that would me or suggested that he was capable of something so violent and something so evil. He was just a very pleasant, kind of quiet guy, just your average man next door.
Is this somebody that you knew for a long time, or?
No, I can't say that. But the rest of my family knew him better than I did, because again, we're talking about a crime and a cast of characters that are Canadian, and here I moved to Connecticut over 20 years ago, so I'm a little bit out of that picture now, but the rest of my family, my brother and his family, and my parents knew him much better than I did, just because he lived up there.
Wow, all right. Now, going back to the cottage, you guys still have it in your family, correct?
We do. It's actually, I hope, something that will always be in the family. We would never consider selling it because my parents treasured it, and as a result, we treasured it. As I was saying, they really, they built it as a legacy for their kids and grandkids, future generations, and it symbolized every triumph in their lives. It symbolized their triumph over the Nazis and their triumph to come to Canada and make new lives for themselves. And it was a place that they considered their safe haven. It was very private, very concealed in the woods, and in an absolutely gorgeous part of Canada called Muskoka, which is just this region on the Canadian Shield, a couple of hours north of Toronto, of hundreds of glittering blue lakes and just beautiful green forests. So it was something that they treasured. The cottage. I don't think we could ever, I don't think we would ever get rid of it. We did have conversations about how we could make it work for our growing families, because once my brother got married and had kids, and I got married and had kids, and then we had dogs to boot, so there were a lot more people living under the same roof when we all went to visit in the summers, and so we had a lot of conversations. And there was maybe a brief moment in time where we kind of kicked around the idea of selling it and getting something bigger or closer to the city. But that was very short-lived because we realized we really could never, it would never be able to leave the family. So we figured out a way to renovate and make it work for everybody. And I hope it'll be there for many, many years to come.
That's awesome. I Googled that, and it's beautiful. And the picture that you have in the book of, I guess it's showing like what it looks like from the dock is amazing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful spot. It's like a magical place. And I remember when I was 7 years old, and a real estate agent took us for a drive to look at land when my parents had scraped together enough money and borrowed some more from my grandmother, and they were ready to buy a little piece of land, like a little pie-shaped lot, and one day build a little cottage on it. And I just remember the drive with the real estate agent going deeper and deeper into the woods, and then seeing the lake kind of spread out in front of me. It was just magical.
Do you feel the presence of the deceased, or has anything weird happened since the murder?
Well, now that you ask, actually, yes.
Uh-oh.
Do I feel the presence? Well, okay, so to begin, yes, I have an overactive imagination. I always have, so I can't help lying awake at night now and just wondering if somebody's looking in the window or if there's a ghost hovering nearby. I say that jokingly, but the truth is something did happen a few years ago that really freaked us all out. We were driving back to the cottage late at night, and so it was completely dark. There are no street lights up there. It was just strictly moonlight, and it was very, very dark that night, and we pulled up beside the cottage and got out of the cars, and we saw this light sort of seeping through. It wasn't a light on inside the cottage, but rather this glow coming from almost just below the rafters. There was really no attic. That whole area was sealed off years and years ago, so there's no attic, there's no storage up there or anything. And yet there was this yellow light coming out of that space, and it was, we still had Tide Park paper, where we had just finished a renovation, so the siding wasn't up yet, and you could see the light glowing through the paper. And then the next night, that light was still there. So we actually called a contractor who had been doing the renovation, and we called him out the next day and said, what's the deal with this light? And he said, there's no light. What are you talking about? There can't be a light. There's no electricity. And anyway, it was a very freaky moment in time, and we ended up tearing through the paper to get access to that space from the outside, and it turns out there was a light on that I can't explain how it's even possible. I know it sounds unbelievable, but there was a light on, and with no explanation of how it had been turned on or how long it had been on, but we knew it hadn't been on before. It just came on in a space that was completely sealed up and not accessible until we actually cut through the wall to get into it. So I was very convinced that it was the murder victim who was reaching out, who was saying, "I'm here, don't forget me." And in fact, that feeling of having her want her story to be told is part of the reason I wrote the book, because I don't want people to forget her. She died a horrible death, and I wouldn't want her just to be a statistic. And I wanted people to remember her name and her story, and I reached out to her family to see if I could get their blessing to tell her story, and they're very happy I did.
Did you have the house cleansed, or did you think about having that done? I know you say you have an overactive imagination. I do too, so don't worry about it. I scare myself all the time. Did you think about doing that, or how do you feel about that?
No, but what should I do? I never thought about doing that.
Cedar?
Well, probably because if it was her, I wouldn't really want her to leave. I would kind of feel like, you can stay. It's part of your journey, and you can kind of hang out if you need to, and you can feel safe here like my parents did. So I don't know if I would want to get it cleansed, but if you do get something cleansed, what do?
You just get some cedar sticks with sage, and sage blesses your house. I'm not saying she is a bad spirit or anything like that, but some people get freaked out and want to do it. Yes, you can burn cedar through your house and then sage.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you tell me where listeners, or where you prefer listeners to contact you?
Well, sure. Again, through my website. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I would love that. They can email me right through the website under the contact section. And again, it's DebbieLevison.com. And there's also Facebook or Twitter. I'm on there. Twitter, I think, is D. Levison Author, and Facebook is Debbie Levison Author. So any of those are great ways to reach me.
All right. My special guest, Deborah Levison, and she has a new book out called The Crate, A Story of War, a Murder, and Justice. The book is available on Amazon.com. Her website is DebbieLevison.com. Debbie, many blessings to you, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Can I tell you one more thing?
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
So the other thing is, I'm very excited that the book is it's out in print, it's out on Kindle, and it's also on audio. And the narrator is really, really terrific. So if there are any audio listeners, it's a good listen. And there's a lot of Hungarian words in there. So the narrator had to basically learn how to speak Hungarian, which was a huge success on her part. So I'm very excited that it's on audio. And I want to give a shout out to my publishers, of course, Wild Blue Press, Steve Jackson and Michael Cordova at Wild Blue Press. And Tantor Media did the audio, so a shout out to all those folks.
All right, that's going to do it for tonight's edition. I want to thank my special guest, Deborah Levison, for joining me again. Make sure you pick up her book from Amazon or Barnes & Noble and get ready to enjoy a really, really good book. I want to thank my producer tonight, Kim. I'm your host, K-Town. Have a good night, and I will see you next time.
Like the show?
Green Arrow, hell yeah. Yeah, with some bullhorns and some skulls and some flags and some my car has personality. I can read the sarcastic of that person. Where are they? Castle Park right here. All right. This is where we're stopping, and this is where I'm saying goodbye. Bye, y'all. People smile at my car because it has a lot of personality. Bye.